So we find a lot of families talk about their loved one who, went off this direction or who went off in that direction. And they go, oh, your brother or your father or son or whatever had this. Well, my, brother or son or father had this. And so it's very difficult. And so while it can affect, mental health, and it can affect mental health in different ways, and it does show up as mental health. And so we have to keep reminding people that these people who've been diagnosed with CTE had a brain disease, because one of the issues around the, I guess, the obvious signs is mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, aggression, irritability, whatever. It then gets mistaken as a mental health issue. And so we start to try to treat these people from a mental health perspective, which doesn't work. I really hate to say, the families who talk about they go and see their psychologist, or they've gone to see a psychiatrist who's, given them depression, antidepressants, hasn't worked, who's given them repetitive TMS, hasn't worked, has given them ECT, hasn't worked, because it's not a mental health disease or condition, it's a brain disease. And so whenever I'm not sure what it's like in the UK, but certainly in Australia, we have um, games that have been dedicated to those who've passed away with CTE, but unfortunately, they dress it up as a mental health issue. So they have these games that raise funds for the Black Dog Institute to look at mental health. We have former players on the big video screen saying, "Talk to your mates. If you're not feeling right, talk to your mates." And this gets a lot of families of those who died with CTE very upset, and plus, myself as well as a researcher, that it's being misrepresented as a mental health issue. Um, because these people were talking to every single person they could for help. They were until the very end, where they just went really quiet and then, did something catastrophic to either themselves or other people. Um, and so, this is why research is so important into CTE, because we've got to try and be able to treat the mechanisms of CTE, not the symptoms of mental health.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just wondering, with America, obviously the NFL, they had that big payout where they had to do that.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
similar actions in the UK with various sports. Is there a moment like that in Australia where not necessarily a payout, but where people are saying we really got to do something about this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a case, there's a class action actually occurring here in Australia with AFL.
Okay.
So, which I'm not involved in. From my understanding, is that they're now at a negotiation. So we might see a settlement payout. I don't know. But it's it's talked about a lot, and maybe this is my bias, but we seem to have we seem to be talking about it a lot, but we're not doing a lot about it. Because again, it's getting misrepresented in terms of concussion. So even the class action here in Australia, they're talking about it as being a concussion class settlement, not a CTE class settlement. Um, and also the issues around mental health. So let's raise money for our mental health charities to help these players. And it's like, well, we're still being, yeah, misinformed around this. And as I said earlier in the podcast, all the research and all the funding into research is really going into concussion diagnostics and ignoring CTE. So, we desperately need um, funding research and support into CTE, because things haven't really changed in terms of modifying sport for kids. Training practices haven't changed. Everything's talked about with concussion. We every time there's an announcement of CTE here in Australia, whether it's in rugby union, rugby league, or Australian football or soccer, um, the sports will automatically spin the message back to, well, we have concussion protocols. Athlete health and well-being is our greatest priority. We have mandatory timeouts now after concussion, and completely forget the CTE.